When I'm working with people wanting big-hearted, kind, generous people to tell better stories, to be better storytellers, like that is what I'm so lit up by. Because the people that are having fun, the people that are dancing, the people that are in abundance in all ways from the inside out are the most attractive. But again, that other part of our brain that's scanning for danger right now is being lit up by all the people that are like, danger, danger, danger. But it's up to us who are telling the stories of the good side of humanity and how amazing it is to be alive. And even though there's a lot of horrible things going on, this is a beautiful, amazing planet full of beautiful people that have so much good in them. And so we have to start telling those stories louder, bigger. That's my passion.
Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. If you're new here, welcome. I'm your host, Nicole Ng Yuen, and this is your go-to self-development podcast where we envision living our best lives by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. And if you're returning, a very warm welcome back. I am so happy to have you back in EnvisionAir. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
Today, we have an exciting and insightful topic to discuss. It's going to be the power of storytelling and how this can impact our lives as well as our brands. Our guest today is Christine DeHerrera, a business coach and story expert who helps high achievers reach next level success. As a publicist, she told stories for Olympic athletes, Fortune 200 individuals, experts, authors, and business owners of every type for more than 20 years. Her clients have been featured on The Martha Stewart Show, Women's Day, NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, as well as hundreds of other media outlets. So I am so excited to have such a seasoned expert in PR and storytelling on the EnvisionAir podcast talk to us about how we can all harness the power of storytelling to make meaningful connections and impactful changes in our lives. So Christine, a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, I'm super excited. Thank you for having me. I love this topic and I hope everyone else does too.
Yeah, well, this is your bread and butter. So I think we should start with the basics. What exactly is storytelling and why is it so important?
Yeah, that's such a fun and interesting question because it all starts with story. So I'm going to start there. Story is actually like an evolutionary part of the human brain. So it's what differentiates us from every other being on this planet, essentially, because we can share information essentially to keep ourselves and others safe. I mean, that's the evolutionary portion of it is we can say, hey, there's food that way, or look out for the bear. And one of the things where it's like even a quantum leap from sharing information is we can make meaning of our experiences. So that really helps us like function as being humans and understanding and sharing what has happened to us or what our hopes and dreams are. So then storytelling is simply sharing story. So literally all 8 billion of us are storytellers in some fashion or another. And storytelling is so powerful that it's even considered one of the archetypes. The storyteller is the person who sets the meaning and the direction for an entire culture, an entire generation. So no biggie.
Yeah, no biggie, just storyteller archetype. I guess when I think of storytelling, I always think that it feels very ambitious to think that I could be a storyteller. And so in your experience, like what makes a good storyteller?
Everybody is a storyteller. So let's just dispel that myth right away. Literally everybody is a storyteller. And so take the pressure off, right?
Okay, that's good.
Some are super gifted storytellers, and that kind of storytelling skill can definitely be used for both good and for maybe not so good. I mean, a good storyteller can lead people right off a cliff or into a brand new world.
Mm.
And in our everyday lives, our ability to just, talk about what's happening with us and share our feelings is how we bond with each other and how we are seen in our own lives. So it does not have to be this grand, epic storytelling that you would see in a movie or a book, or, that super, super amazing actor or whatever. It is just being the storytellers of our lives so that people in our lives can see us and know us and help us and inspire us, and we can do the same for them.
Mm. And well, okay, so let's talk about the different ways we can actually storytell. And thank you so much for dispelling this idea that we have this like huge, when I think of an amazing storyteller, I'm thinking of like these amazing orators who like capture millions of people's attention. And what I'm hearing you say is essentially that everyone has a story to share, and it's basically relaying that in a way that can be, I guess, is natural to someone, right, in whatever voice that is or whatever manner that is. But let's talk about storytelling then. How can it let's talk about in all the different areas of our life, because obviously I appreciate that if you're a public persona, if you have a public persona and you have an online presence, storytelling is essential. It's key, right? But why is storytelling so important in, like, for example, in your romantic life or in, with your friends, and even in your, I guess, we can talk about the careers and the businesses, but yeah, tell us, what do you think?
Oh gosh, I mean, absolutely. We're all using story. And like, let's think about in a romantic relationship. Like, let's start at the beginning when you're first meeting it. In the modern age, you're first meeting probably on an app or maybe through friends or out and about, but often on an app. And even something is just those few words you choose for your bio sets the tone for how people are going to perceive you and approach you. And what kind of person would approach you via the internet, right? So storytelling there is so important. And again, like, just boiling story down to its most essential piece is just letting somebody step into the shoes of another person. So story is like a character, right? And then a character as a challenge and a resolution. And so using the bio on a dating app, just those couple words that you put in there, like, are you a family person? Are you an adventurer? And of course, there's much more fun and nuanced ways to say that. But what you put in your bio impacts who even will swipe,
Yeah.
which is so interesting. And I think that's actually a challenge of modern life, is like, how do you boil down your entire lived experience, the essence of your soul, all of that into a few words on the internet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard. Well, and I guess on that note, like, okay, well, so that I love this. And I like the idea. We're obviously later on going to be talking about how we can start crafting our own stories and reflecting. So before we go into that, okay, so that makes sense. Romantic relationships, it's almost like, here I am, and you're wanting to make sure that the right suitors and or potential romantic partners are actually aligned with the story that you're telling, right? You want to convey that. Okay. What about in your career or with your business?
Yeah. And I would say, like, let's look at folks with a job first.
Mhm.
Like, your resume is the story of your career from the beginning to the end. And what do you put in that? I mean, that is a story in and of itself. And then you go to the job interview, which is most likely online to start with, and you might even be in a group. So, like, what are those key things about yourself that you're sharing? Well,
Mhm.
that's what is going to bond that interviewer to you or not. And so, yeah, I mean, as a total story nerd, I'm like, story. But I guess one thing I would say is there can be these epic stories like we talked about earlier with the great, the great leaders that we think of, but you can also use logical stories as well. The key thing there is that story evokes emotion usually. And so even when you're using logic, there's usually an emotional piece, if you will. So if you're describing yourself, say, as a lawyer, that's good information. And you may want to add something to that, even if it's as simple as why you became a lawyer or the type of lawyer you are, or what about law appealed to you as a person, like to just stand out. If you're in a job interview, like in a group job interview, everybody's probably, and the position is lawyer, you're all lawyers, right? And so what was the thing that drew you to law in that particular type of law and makes you apply for this job? And again, I'm kind of using these very beginning pieces from like swiping left or right or like the job interview, just because that's where it's like, there's not much time to tell your story. And telling it in an impactful way that's true to you is how you end up in the right places in your life with the right people.
Oh, love that. Okay. So now why is storytelling so important with your family and friends? So people who know you, who you don't necessarily feel like, you have to sort of intuitively, you don't think, oh, I need to like impress or sway or, anything. So why is it important with family and friends?
Yeah, that's such a fun one. I mean, in a lot of ways, your family and your true friends should literally know all of your stories, but they don't. I mean, we think about it, like some stories we keep for ourselves, no matter what, and that's okay. And I think it is important to dispel the myth a little bit of the internet, which is that to be seen, to be visible, to have influence, you have to either make up a story that's not true, so you sound more glamorous and exciting than you actually are, or like you have to just let it all hang out and be totally vulnerable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but even within our own families and our friendships, there's pieces of us that people don't know. And the more we can share with people, the more they'll know us and truly know us. And I guess I kind of got off track with the internet, but but there's just such an overlap now because our public persona is becoming, it's being changed by how the world is now.
Mm-hmm.
And in your family, I think the most important thing is that, yes, in our families, we have influence over each other,
Mm-hmm.
but the in some ways, the least amount of storytelling, like you can get away with your partner saying, oh my gosh, I had the worst day. So-and-so at work was, bleh. You don't have to add embellishment or anything because they know what you've been through because they already know the other side of your story. So they know if you're having a hard day with a coworker, that they know what it means. You don't have to add any additional meaning. That's the biggest difference, I would say, with storytelling with your friends and family that really know you, is you already know so much. You can just cut right to today's conflict and hear their thoughts or support for the resolution of that conflict.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I also feel like in terms of family, I'm not a parent yet, but I feel like even as a parent, or even, well, let's just talk about all people in a family. I feel like what now I realize, even for my mom, for example, as you get older, you start realizing, oh, she's not just mom. She's like mom, she's girlfriend, she is daughter herself. She is so many different things. And I think even within a family, we all wear different hats. And so that is really interesting. Even the narratives, historic narratives that were formed that no longer apply, it was siblings and roles that we all had when we were children, so this idea of maybe storytelling, I can see also another way we can use it almost to evolve those relationships that we have as well within families.
Exactly. I mean, I think in a family dynamic, or even with really good friends that you've known a long time, is to realize there's all this, what you're saying, there's all these different facets of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to, in a way, think we know everything about the people we know the best is a little bit where some conflict comes back into the story, because people have all these other experiences in their other aspects of life that then influence our interactions with them.
Yeah.
And so when you think of story in that way, like allowing people the space, not thinking you know everything about them, especially not thinking you know the ending of a piece of a story, like the work conflict or whatever, and allowing people and your family to be the full expression of themselves, which that is a really new phenomenon to even consider that. I mean, at all. And again, the storytelling around what is family has evolved, and in different cultures, it's different. I mean, so much like.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's really interesting, obviously. And I agree with you on that point. And it's very nuanced as well, because I mean, and this, maybe we can talk about this because that was a question I had when we were just discussing this. And then you talked about this idea of culture, because I think in different cultures, some people find sharing or oversharing, is a faux pas, or it's really frowned upon, sharing your emotions. So I guess, what do you have to say as someone who is an advocate of storytelling? What would you say in those sorts of situations, those environments, those cultures where oversharing or showing too much is not really part of the culture? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I think it's really the nuance piece of anything around storytelling is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And in Western culture, for example, there's such a push for the hero's journey type of story, which is like, there's a hero, and at least now we get to add, there's a heroine. There's a heroine, and she has these big goals, and she wants to set off on some kind of grand adventure, but she has to decide if she really wants to do it, because there's a challenge right away, and then 180-degree turn, and she is going off to achieve her great dream. Whether, like in the old days, 3 minutes ago, it was like the dream is to marry the handsome prince, or now it's like conquer New York City, or now I think it's like figure out how to live on the beach with and be able to enjoy nature. But then there would be a series of obstacles. She would almost get there, and then all heck would break loose, and that would be the dark night of the soul. Do you really want this dream? And then, of course, she would decide, yes, I want this dream, and make that final push to overcome the obstacles and reflect back her great journey to her group of friends, family. And like a perfect example of that is the Barbie movie that, probably lots of listeners have seen or heard of, because I mean, that hits every single piece of the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. But that is just one kind of story. It's just in Western culture, it is pushed so much. And that feeling of the individual against the odds, maybe they have a guide, like in Barbie, it's Weird Barbie's the guide, laying out the plan for her. One of the things that's actually different about Barbie is there's a lot more community involved in the Barbie movie. Towards the end, they all come together, and that is kind of an evolution in commercial storytelling, because usually it's just the hero does it all by himself.
Okay.
And that's led to a certain kind of because story is so powerful, that's led to entire cultures thinking that that's how you have to do it. Like, again, in Western culture in North America, like the rugged, pioneer, and because that kind of storytelling allowed people to just run roughshod over all other kinds of people. And so there's some challenges with the hero's journey story. Related to other cultures, there are other kinds of storytelling. And so I think it's really important to recognize that, and that all stories are valuable, all different kinds of plots. But the outcome is always sharing the information, being seen, and keeping everybody safe. The hero's journey story it's very captivating. It can be very empowering, but it is not the only kind of story. And different cultures have other story plots, and they're all valid. So if you're learning about story, say, to use in your business, and that hero's journey doesn't feel authentic to you, there's nothing wrong with you. Just you'll want to explore story further.
Yeah.
and find a plot that feels more authentic.
So when you say, I love that idea that about the authenticity, because I think sometimes even myself, like, um, when I was writing, I'm writing this book, my book right now, and it's about how it's called, It's Never Too Late to Pivot Your Life. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo. It's so exciting. And
Yes.
yeah, and it really was meant to serve more as like a guide, a framework. Now, of course, I share some of my story of pivoting, which I've done, and the major changes, and how I've essentially done that successfully. But it's really more of like, I really want to be a practical guide, like framework for people to use. And I remember telling my husband when I was writing the introduction, I was like, I don't feel like it feels like I need to like say like, and then I was a drug addict and I was like living on the streets, and my life, I was like, what's happened? And then I finally pivoted my life. No, because like that's not what happened. You know what I definitely there is some trauma, there is some stuff that happened in my early 20s. And I went to a therapy though for it, and I dealt with it, and that probably helped me to then move into the next space of my life. But I feel like it just didn't feel right. I said, maybe that's the next book is to talk about, hitting rock bottom, which we all do in different ways, and then rebuilding. There's no doubt about that. It just didn't feel authentic in this book. And so this is really actually reassuring for someone like me, because I'm thinking that's great to know. Like, I don't have to do the Western sort of like hero rock bottom. Of course, I had struggles. I was trying to decide. I wasn't happy. I was trying to decide what's the next step, and but it wasn't like hitting rock bottom fully. And now what do I do? So what I wanted to ask you is like, what are the different storytelling options if it's not the hero's journey? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, I don't even know that we could get into them. Behind me are books full of different.
Oh, really? Is that right? Okay.
I told you, story nerd. Like, I think I have every book about storytelling ever written. I mean, one of the stories I would like to see more of, this, I think might answer your question, especially related to the therapy piece and, overcoming traumas and stuff, is that happens in community. And so the community piece of full community, and not just like, I'm a rugged individual and I solved all my problems. I think that's where the inauthentic piece is, because again, like if you want to look at caricatures in the West, it was like the man was the king of his castle here in suburbia. And really, there was like a whole team of people making it so he could just go off and be the king. Basically, like there's always been more than just the rugged individual who was leading the way. And again, because people are aware of storytelling. And so now you can really see it everywhere you go. It becomes almost a caricature of itself, right? What you said, you hit rock bottom and blah, blah, blah. And now you're like, yeah. And I think to have it feel more authentic is like one of the places I like to start with people when I'm working with them is not just like, tell me who you are. That's really aggressive, right? But like, what do you value? What is the, like, if this is for your book, like, what do you want people to take away from the book? What is the message of the book? And so outside of like using story for business, like, what do you value in your life? And you start with that piece, because otherwise it can just so easily become that caricature of, I went through some hard shit and now I'm awesome. Because the reason that feels authentic is because that's going to happen over and over and over again in our life, right? I mean, if you're growing as a person, you have new challenges because you're putting yourself in challenging situations because you love to grow and learn and have adventures. So part of why it feels so inauthentic is like it's a one-time deal. Like, I hit rock bottom and now I'm awesome. Yeah. And so I would say like a good place to start if you're struggling with like, where do I start? How do I tell this story is like, what do I value? And then why do I value that? Because that starts to, a lot of times we're not super aware of our own deepest story, like the bigger picture in our life. Like that is where I think people struggle the most, and is trying to figure that out. Like what is the sum total of all of that I've learned so far? And you can dig into that in a coming at it from an angle versus like, I'm just going to sit down and write every bad thing that happened to me, because that leaves out all of the amazing things that have happened. But if you start with something like, what are my values? What is my intention? And in a business situation, that my intention for this project, and then why? And it really becomes like unpeeling those layers of why, which does not have to have like a linear element. So back to your original question, the hero's journey is pretty linear. I mean, it's like this, but it's still like point A to B, right?
Yeah.
Real life isn't like that. And you can tell stories that are not linear if you know where they're going, because you are still adding those elements of conflict in. You are still having those moments of inspiration followed by more conflict. And that's what like piques our interest. So back to the brain science of story, like that piques our interest because our nervous system is always scanning for like, what is safe, what is not safe. And so that's why the challenge piece is so important in story, but it doesn't have to be linear, and it doesn't have to be purely individual. And from there, you can kind of meld with different story types. What is not a story is just a series of events. That's why when like we all have that relative or friend who is not working with their greatest storytelling gifts and just tells you a laundry list of things that happened. And again, if they're a close friend, you might have context that they don't need to add. But, you know, the aunt you only see twice a year that gives you the laundry list and you're like, oh my goodness, that's why. Because the context has been lost.
Okay, I like that. That is really helpful. And I like this idea of context. It basically means, well, you tell me, but what I get from that is that whenever you're presenting yourself to anyone, whether it's family, friends, your colleagues, boss, business, clients, you're constantly trying to contextualize what the conversation is and essentially who you are. It seems like there's a great element of self-awareness that's required in storytelling effectively. Is that right?
Yeah. And I would say storytelling responsibly, because again, story is such a powerful technology that, I mean, if you start paying attention, you see it literally everywhere. I mean, it's why we buy whatever brand of milk we buy, or whether we drink milk at all. It is why we vote for whoever we vote for. Pretty much everything has a story attached to it, and you can start to see how it can be so manipulative. And so the responsibility aspect of story, I think, is not talked about enough. And that is kind of the state of affairs we're in right now, right? Like globally, there's a lot of leaders who are, we'll just call them questionable, because we're not going to add to the story, right? But that are storytelling in certain ways and causing all kinds of chaos. And so, yeah, the responsibility piece is really, really important with story, because it is so effective at creating an emotion and causing us to take an action from that emotion. And I think that that's where all the nuance and the context gets lost if we're looking at storytelling via the internet, you know, in all of its forms, social media, news, any of it, is like the nuance, the context is like kind of just, it's being obliterated, because I mean, that's what's happening.
And so would you recommend, because I feel like if you're online, at least, it feels like you almost have to be polarizing or controversial as a storyteller to get attention. Is that doesn't seem to marry up well with the responsibility element, though. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly kind of a quandary, right? Because for sure, the algorithms that push out the information are very binary. Well, life isn't binary. We wish it was in some ways, but it's just not. And so again, that's where that responsibility as an individual comes in. And I wish the responsibility also lies and the people writing the algorithms and standing to gain from the algorithms with advertising dollars. And so, but when I'm working with people, it's like, when I'm working with people wanting big-hearted, kind, generous people to tell better stories, to be better storytellers, like that is what I'm so lit up by, because the people that are having fun, the people that are dancing, the people that are in abundance in all ways from the inside out are the most attractive. But again, that other part of our brain that's scanning for danger right now is being lit up by all the people that are like, danger, danger, danger. But it's up to us who are telling the stories of the good side of humanity and how amazing it is to be alive. And even though there's a lot of horrible things going on, this is a beautiful, amazing planet full of beautiful people that have so much good in them. And so we have to start telling those stories louder, bigger. And I mean, that's just like, that's my passion.
I love that. That's amazing, Christine. Okay, so let's like, obviously, I think that the EnvisionAir listeners are just amazing. They're just such warm, intellectually curious, kind, and empathetic, bunch. And so they're listening and they're like, that's me. I want to start telling my story big. So how do we start to craft our own stories? And do we need to have a story ready for like all the different areas in our life? Or, I mean, you did mention this idea of starting down, sitting down, and kind of what are your values and, intentionally thinking about these things. But yeah. And also, does it have to be long, short? Is it like an elevator pitch? How do we do it?
Well, number one, there's like every kind of story. And again, whether you're like in business in some fashion or you are not, like you can have a million different stories, a million different links, a million different layers to them. So there is no one right story, obviously. But we do need to be able to tell our story. So let's make a specific example that one of the amazing listeners goes to networking events for her career, for example. Being able to sum up your life for strangers in a way that makes you feel empowered, makes them feel curious, because again, curiosity, that they want to keep interacting. That's how we build a network of like-minded people, is by sharing parts of ourselves that are valuable. And back to your polarizing question, when we share the parts of ourselves that are valuable and important to us, other people might not mesh, and that's okay, because we don't need to network with them particularly. It doesn't have to be in an aggressive way at all, but just like you find your people by sharing who you are. And it's just that simple. And so, but it's just that simple until you go to a networking event and you're nervous and like, oh my gosh, I have to say something. And so if you're the kind of person that likes to prepare in advance because you want to have something sort of like right coming out of you, I think starting with your values is really a useful place to start, because again, like I said, you're coming at it from an angle. Another way is to, if it's a career networking event, is like, why are you in the career you're in? And get really clear. So any kind of career, there's a reason you picked it. And sometimes it's for good reason. Oh my gosh, this is my passion. And then it's really easy to talk from that place and share with people in a way that just lights them up. And then they want to share their story with you. And so another piece of the storytelling is to take in other people's stories and not just be like, it's all about me. When we're in a networking event, we want to hear their stories, because that's, again, like, are we aligned? Do we have common ground? Absolutely, or absolutely not. But why? Starting with your values and then going to your why. And then another piece I like to say, and so right now we're like brainstorming. I like to write stuff down. Some people just like to think. Some people like to make voice notes. Capture this information as you're working on it. Notes in your phone are great, simply because we mostly have our phones attached to us at all time, and you think you're going to remember it all and you won't. So writing down your values, where you came up with those values, and how you got into your career. And then the next thing is sometimes we like to skip over the hard stuff. And again, it's up to your discretion how much of the hard stuff you want to go into. But again, when people can see we've overcome something, and this is a little bit the hero's journey, right? But it adds layer, it adds points where we can understand each other and also see, like, nobody likes the person that's like, I decided to do the thing and it was so easy and I just did it and magically I am the best at it in the whole world. Like, that's not really a story because there's no truth in it, right? Because there's no challenge. So we start there, and then you can just work with it and start to feel it so that then it comes out more naturally. Do you want to like share a tiny piece of your journey?
Yeah.
How you got, as an example, and then we can talk about it.
Okay. Oh, this is fun. Like spotlight coaching. I love it. Okay. So, for the book, what I did was I didn't feel like I wasn't living in my car, homeless. It was more like I felt stuck, and I felt really stuck. And so I really took that feeling of feeling stuck in my career and having this unshakable kind of intuitive thing that there's something more to this. I started kind of there, and then I explored, and I said, well, this is what I did then. And I did my life audit, which I've talked about before, which is like that tool. I assessed my life. I started, zoning in on the areas that needs to change, particularly in my career. And also and then I started brainstorming, and then I started doing this and doing that and And that's the sort of that's the step-by-step process for me that I want to share, which is how to affect change, transformative change in your life. So I started with that. I don't know. What do you think as a storyteller?
I think it is exactly perfect in the sense of you had a starting place. You had something happen. It was internal in this case. You're feeling stuck. You did some stuff. The only thing is we don't know exactly what stuff, but the life audit, since that's your thing, that's more into that. Yeah. And then where are you now? So making sure to share all of those things. And again, when you're putting this together, I would recommend not trying to get it down to the 4 sentences to share at the networking event, but really dig into it. Because we might use language like, I'm so stuck, but there is likely an even more compelling way of saying that. Ooh. And again, in a networking event, I'm stuck might be fine, but in what way were you stuck? Were you waking up in the middle of the night, unable to sleep because you didn't want to go to work? Were you starting to affect your relationships because you felt really isolated because everybody else seemed to be moving ahead? Right. Things like that. So that eventually you can bring in 5 sensory detail, which is why, using your example of the over the top, I was sleeping in my car, that has such a visceral feeling to it. It does. But all of us have that thing of I wasn't answering my mom's phone calls, or I stopped talking to my friends because I felt so embarrassed that everyone was having so much fun in their career and I wasn't. Or if it's the weight of your career on your shoulders, I was in this, and you would give more detail, but I could not make any change happen in this organization. And I felt like my soul was slowly being drained out of my body. So that you can add some 5 sensory detail, because that's the piece that people will remember. It's so what if you don't mind?
No.
And I will say, the more you share your own story,
I love it.
People will remember it more. So
100%. Well, look, I have definitely this idea of the soul being kind of suffocated. I have used that as a metaphor. When I was working in private practice as a corporate lawyer, I've been very quite open about my struggles. And that is definitely something because a lot of people tell me why did you leave as a corporate lawyer? And I'm I genuinely felt a part of me was being suffocated, my soul not dead, not drained, but literally suffocated. And I was like, I need this. This is not right. So that 100%, I can definitely align with. I guess the first pivot, the main pivot when I was working in politics, it was, you're right. It was that sort of, like, and not to say, because I feel like I really have a lot of respect for my, my old boss and so on, but it was more the job. Like it was that feeling of dread going in. It was like I was going into this place, so the Parliament building. So just to show, like to give the illustration, these majestic parliamentary buildings in the Capitol. As working as a political staffer, people, and I've said this, like people thought like, hey, you made it. I was a political science student. Now I'm working, for a high-ranking senior political official. And I'm dreading going into this majestic office, these majestic, buildings. And I have dread walking up those up the hill. It's called the hill, Parliament Hill, walking up the hill when everyone is so excited and so thrilled to be able to be going into this office. So that for me was like, something is off. I don't know why, but like I'm having major dread in the pit of my stomach. So I really like this idea of the illustrative element that you've really helped me to remember and to go back to. I mean, what would you say? Do you think that's enough, or is there more that because I'm sure, like, again, a little deep dive, I would probably harness a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I mean, if I was working with you, like, I would want to get all the way to the bottom of it. If there's more, that may be the bottom of it. But if there's more, like the more specific, the more 5 sensory detail, the more you can, like, okay, so you're saying like, I'm walking up Parliament Hill with all these other people who are so clearly thrilled to be there. And like the more pieces of that we can give 5 sensory detail. So now we're walking in your shoes, and the sense of dread that's coming over your body as like all the other parts of your personality just like shut off to go do this job that at no doubt one point you were so excited to have.
100%.
And that's when it becomes so memorable, right? Because it's 100% specific to you. It's painting a picture with words. And that's where people will also find little pieces, little facets of that story that they relate to versus I was stuck.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thankfully the book is in a manuscript and so it's just draft right now. So I'm going to have to go back to this and rework it. But yeah, I love what you've done. And I love how you have given the listeners, and thank you for sharing this with me here. But I love this idea of really going deep diving into it. I guess what I would say though, because I have some friends, writers, and who, that they're also writing their books, and we would regularly meet and talk. And I think I described it. It's a very heavy process to go into, because sometimes you're going back. It's like time traveling. That's why I described it as, and which is kind of cool. But then if it's sort of a place where you've kind of shut that down, compartmentalized it and moved on, right? You're kind of like, it can be emotionally draining to go back, and a little bit like, do I really want to go back to how when I was not feeling great and I was feeling low, and, and so how do people get over that sort of nervousness, or, to revisit some of those past, they could be traumas, or they could be, just negative experiences.
Yeah, I think I would say it's not a very fine line, in the sense of like, if you're still being super triggered or activated by an experience that you've had, maybe it's not time to share it publicly, or maybe never. And that's okay too. Like, we don't owe anybody anything in our past that we don't want to share. But if it's something that like, is really part of your mission on the planet, if it's part of like how you help other people, like, then part of it is that is partly how you begin to think it through, is like, this actually, my story is not for me at this point. My story is for the people that can learn something and receive benefit from it, so that they too can make these really positive changes. Because the end result of all that dread and like digging in and figuring things out was oh my gosh, you've got a new career and a podcast and a book coming out. And in that way, it was all worth what you went through. And so I always like to say our stories aren't for us, they're for the people we're helping. And so that's a piece. But at the same time, you don't owe anybody anything. And it's fine to keep some of your stories to yourself, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Christine, this is so good. And hey, final question for you I have, which is, now let's say people have done that sort of deep dive and they know where their values are. They know what they're trying to get out to the world. How do they package it up? Like, as in, how do we do it? Like, because obviously there's this digital world, there's a digital option. Then there's also people maybe in person. Like, what do you do now? What's the next step in terms of storytelling?
Yeah. So can we use you as the example with the book
Please.
coming out?
Yeah. Yeah.
So usually, I mean, when you go out and promote a book, like, you're going to have to go on other people's podcasts. And so they're going to want to hear the stories. So you'd pick out 3 or 4 things, 3 or 4 events that are in the book or related to the book in some fashion. And you would spend some time honing those stories. So getting each one polished and knowing that every time you tell it, it gets better and better, because more things get revealed to us. So you don't have to perfect things before you start using them. I'd like to dispel that myth as well. Like, it's perfectly fine to have been saying, I was stuck and I did this and now I'm doing this. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's a whole nother layer here, and that's okay. Or another detail comes back, like the scent in the air on that day when you walked through, a Parliament Hill.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh.
And so the more you tell the stories, like, we get sick of our own stories and start to question their value. So I will also say that, like, when you've heard stuff enough times, you're like, oh my gosh, who cares? This is boring. But it's not boring to the person that's never heard it or is so invested in your story that they want to hear it again.
Yeah.
So it's the polishing and the working with them. And usually, 3 or 4 stories would be plenty to go promote a book, for example, using that as our example. And just making sure you feel really grounded in them, authentic in them, and comfortable telling them before you go out there. So, like, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people don't want to put enough time into that process. But in my experience, like, the effort you put in to identifying the right stories to promote your book, the better.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it'll get you remembered. And that's one of the great things about story, is it's sticky. Like, people remember stories. They'll tell other people your stories. They won't remember just factual information.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that idea of, like, the emotion, you want them to remember the emotion, the association in some ways. And I feel like I have heard this idea, or I think I can't remember where I heard it, but it stayed with me. Someone has to hear information 7 times before it actually sticks. And so, like you said, you might think that, oh, I've repeated the story so many times and maybe some people have heard it and some people haven't. But ultimately, even the people who have heard it, if it's only the 3rd or 4th time hearing it, it's probably not even going to stick. And also, interestingly, so I went to see, I don't know if you're a big fan or not. It feels, again, polarizing. I love him, but Tony Robbins. So
I started my life young listening to Tony.
Yeah, he's amazing. Okay, I love him. I think he's great. So, but again, it feels like it's divisive sometimes. But I went to the UPW, like Unleash Your Power. Ooh, it was really good. I went last year, first time. Yeah. So that was actually, I'd always kind of listened, but like not as, and then I went to this concert. Amazing. And have you been?
I have not been. All of my experiences with Tony were like, this is going to date me, on CDs back in the day, right?
You know what? If you would say audio cassettes, it would have been even like, But I'll tell you, the reason I'm saying that is because he in this conference last year, right? So he was amazing, brilliant, one of the best orators I've ever seen. Sorry. I bought his audiobook, Awaken the Giant, and listened to that. And that is probably about 20 years old, like long time. But some of the stories he said on stage and the examples are the same ones that he used 20 years ago. So it's really interesting that you're saying this idea that, like, he has obviously perfected he knows the stories, he knows what resonates, and he has honed in on that. And that's really interesting. And I also share one more thing. I had heard that Martin Luther King Jr., the speech, I Have a Dream. Maybe it's not that speech, but definitely one of the speeches that he's given, which is so popular. He had given those, it was like hundreds of times the same. I don't know if it was I Have a Dream. I don't want to say that factually, but I feel like it could have been. And if you think about it, that moment that it was delivered and that was recorded, and it just had so much profound impact. I mean, up until now, generations and generations, you just think, wow, but it's because they are perfecting exactly that same thing. It's the story, and it's maybe like every time there's a new element, there's a new emphasis. So I think that's really beautiful. I want to share that because you hit the nail on the head with that as well.
Yeah, I think I would say two things that's really interesting about the same stories from this really old book. But it makes sense, because a powerful story that evokes emotion and makes people take an action is a great story. And so it makes sense that something that's 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, 100 years old can still be that powerful. And the more stories you tell, the more you're out there with people, doing all these things. There are those moments of absolute inspiration where something that you've never done before just pours out of you. And those are brilliant stories too. So there's every kind, but in general, like when you're going to do something related to marketing or that kind of thing, having them prepared and thought through is useful.
100%. I mean, that's where people like you come in so beautifully. So, I did have one more final question. It came into my head because I was thinking there might be some people listening who feel like maybe they don't get listened to. They don't feel seen, even though they're talking, and maybe some people ignore them. Some people don't give them the attention they deserve. Or maybe, they just, I don't know, the environment they work in is one which is not very supportive and so on. What do you say to them when they feel deflated or like they're not being seen or heard? What do you say to them?
What comes to mind is, if people aren't interested in your stories, it's not you, it is the other people. And so you got to find your people who will resonate with your stories, that want to learn about you. And yes, we can all get better at telling our stories. So taking that piece away, being in community with your people, they care about you. They want to hear your stories. So instead of trying to tell your stories to people that don't care, I would say, let's go find the people. Because, and again, this is the great beauty of storytelling, because in sharing our stories, it's like, oh, you get me. And oh, you are my person. And there are 8 billion of us on the planet. And like that loneliness that we all feel sometimes, like that is a universal human emotion. And when you get with the right people, they understand that. And so, and it's hard, and I'm not saying it's easy, but don't internalize somebody not respecting the journey you've been on in your life, because they're just not for you. And that sucks. and there's somebody that is for you though. And just keep finding them. Just keep finding them.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Beautiful. Well, look, we're moving on to the final segment of the Envision. This is the EnvisionAir questionnaire, and so it's 3 questions, rapid fire. Reflecting back on your past, present, and future. So, reflecting on your past, if there is any advice you can give your 15-year-old self, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say, all the things that you think are weird about yourself are going to make you amazing. That's how my whole business started, was being a weird horse girl who liked writing. And those things all came together. So yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to ramble on this much, but I would just say, be your weird ass self.
Love it.
It works for you. Go for it.
Amazing. What's one thing now, looking on your present, what's one thing that you are very grateful for?
Oh my gosh. Literally everything. I mean, I feel that like one of the things I trying to continue to grow and practice is to be present, because when we're present, we can see so much. And so, I mean, this morning I got up and I went for a walk outside at like 7 o'clock. It was beautiful. The sky was blue. It's Colorado, beautiful blue sky. There was a little breeze. I mean, being in a body that you can experience a breeze and see blue sky, like I'm literally trying to be aware of being grateful for all of the things.
Yeah, great. Oh, that's so good. And then what is one thing in your future? What's one thing that you would like to achieve?
Well, I'm on a mission to turn everybody into storytellers for the good. So whatever that looks like, I'll let the universe tell me what the scope, size, impact of that is. I'm excited when any one person starts to grasp that. But so that's my mission, and I will fulfill it however the universe sees fit.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, we'll be rooting you on for sure. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. You have been so brilliant. You have taught us how storytelling can really transform our lives. And I can't wait to put this into effect. And like, I'm so much to think about here and so much value add. So thank you again, Christine. And if people want to connect with you and work with you or follow you, because you do a lot, I know on your Instagram, you give a lot of really interesting advice and tips. So tell us how can they follow you, connect with you?
Well, thank you for having me. This was so fun. If you want to find me, Instagram is the best place. It's just at Christine DeHerrera, and it has links to my website and, you know, different freebies and programs and fun things like that. And I'll be nerding out on story over there. So come join me.
Love it. And you have your podcast coming out also.
I do. Soon. This fall in September, you can find me on all the usual places with my podcast, You Are the Magic.
Oh, amazing. Love it. Well, we're going to link everything in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you again, Christine. You are amazing. And thank you, EnvisionAirs, for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys showing up. And I'm sending you all so much love, and keep envisioning your best lives. Lots of love. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.